And welcome back to Get Me a Library. I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be doing a video all about Hecate, who is one of the deities in Greek mythology. She's a goddess, but she's not one of the most famous goddesses in the sense of the Olympians. So she's not an Olympian, she's not one of the main six, but she's still an important part in Greek mythology, and she is still a goddess. So Hecate is the goddess of magic, she's the goddess of ghosts, necromancy, and also the goddess of witchcraft. So she's a very powerful goddess. She's got like the magical element to her. The witchcraft, which could be seen as dark and mysterious. I mean, she's associated quite a lot with Hades in the underworld. She's seen as one of his friends, a part of that dark domain down below in the underworld and Tartarus. So she's not seen as one of the pretty goddesses in the sense of like rainbows and butterflies and magic. She's seen as one of the darker goddesses in Greek mythology. So she's seen as one of the most mysterious goddesses in the whole of Greek mythology. Little is known about her, but what is known about her is still quite mysterious. So she's not known as someone that you know a lot of information about. She's still quite mysterious. Little is known about her. They're not sure whether she's a goddess, whether she was a titan, whether she was both. In the book here, it says that her parents were likely to be the Titans Perseus and Asteria, and she was known in Greek mythology as holding torches. Sometimes you see her in a lot of artwork where she has got three faces, holding torches with snakes around her. She's so cool. Like, I actually love Hecate so much. She was very fascinating, she was important, and she was a very, very powerful witch. She practiced what the ancient Greeks called pharmacy, which was the use of herbs and plants to create potions, and where we use the word pharmacy. So a lot of our words that we have in day-to-day life leads back to the Greeks and Greek mythology, and she was probably seen as like an apothecary person, someone like in a pharmacy nowadays. So if she had a job now, she'd be working in Boots Pharmacy. She literally knew her potions and her plants. And nowadays it's not so bad to be a witch, but back if you think about like the 1800s where they used to burn witches and like the Salem massacre and stuff, like she would have been seen as a bad thing. So it's very weird how you go from Greek mythology to having witches and being a bit scared of them, but actually loving that, to then hating them, to liking them again. Like, the world is just crazy in how it works. So Hecate was believed to have discovered a number of poisonous plants and potions that she would use to tip javelins and spears to make them far more deadly. According to some sources, Hecate would also test these poisons and potions on strangers that she came across. She fed strangers poisonous food to see how they would react. Whether that was to save the human race later on with medicine, or whether it was just because she was a bit cruel, either way, I wouldn't have wanted to have been one of those strangers that passed her by. Hecate was best known for guiding the goddess Demeter with those torches that she had as the goddess searched for her daughter Persephone. So one of the biggest myths that she's involved in is the abduction of Persephone. So if you look at my previous videos that I've got tagged here where we talk about Demeter, and we've got one for Persephone and Hades, we talk a little bit about that in this video. We talk about that in that video there. But just a quick recap in case you've not watched it or you're not interested in it too much about those gods and goddesses. Basically, Persephone got kidnapped by Hades, the love of her life, and her mum Demeter went on this search for her, and she approached the goddess Hecate, who tried to help her find Persephone and took her to the god Helios, who travels around the world with the sun in his chariot, and he is basically the sun god, and he sees all. So she took Demeter to him to help find Persephone. So that's her big myth that she's sort of a part of. It was Hecate who heard Persephone cry out, although she didn't immediately know who was taken. Once Persephone was located in the underworld of Hades, Hecate became her companion in the world of the dead. So although Hecate sort of stayed away from the underworld at the very beginning, she then later became one of Persephone's best friends and stayed in the underworld with her. And if you haven't read the Lore Olympus book yet, do so. If you haven't seen it on Webtoon, go check it out, and there you'll find that Persephone then does become best friends with Hecate in there. And Hecate is also one of Hades' confidants. He's one of his best friends, one of his leaders, part of the underworld. She has like a major part in that, and that is what Hecate went on to do. So she is seen as like someone who's dark, mysterious, magical, witchy, and she does live in the underworld with Hades, Persephone, Cerberus, and everybody else there. The witch goddess was seen to have spent her time at crossroads or tombs, and she was often accompanied by a polecat or a dog, who was originally a woman named Hecate, the queen of Troy. Hecuba refused to go as a slave with the Greeks after the fall of Troy, and instead she jumped into the sea and was transformed into a dog. We'll get on to talking about her in another video. But I think that's quite cool to then be a part of Hecate's life and to be a companion to her instead of going into the underworld with everyone else from Troy. According to some, in her role as an infernal goddess alongside Persephone, Hecate often spent time wandering with the souls of the dead, her presence announced by the ominous howl of dogs. So when you see her with the snakes and the 3 heads and the torches with some dogs, that's how she was perceived. So she would be by the dead, maybe helping Charon ferry them across the sea, but she would be associated with the howl of the dogs, and then you would see Hecate standing there ominously with all of her torches and her snakes. Like a number of goddesses in Greek mythology, like Hester, Hecate was incredibly important in the Greek world, but there are very few, if any, recorded stories of her. So although she played a massive part in Greek mythology, there isn't that many stories about her, which makes her all the more mysterious, ominous, and more exciting. So what other facts do we have about Hecate? Because like I said, there's not that much information about her, but that doesn't mean that she didn't have a part in it and that she wasn't important, and we don't have some facts about her. So as I said before about Hecate being seen as having 3 faces, a lot of the Greeks sort of combined her, Demeter and Persephone together to create a triple goddess. So you would have Hecate, who was the wise woman, you would have Persephone, who was the young maiden, and Demeter, who was the mother, and together they would create the triple goddess. So although Demeter had her issues with Persephone and Hades, I like to believe that she then sort of joined as a 3 then to be a part of each other's lives, because they were a story. I mean, without Persephone you wouldn't have Demeter, without Demeter you wouldn't have Persephone, and then Hecate was still involved in the abduction and trying to find her, and then you would have the fact that Persephone then became her friend. So all 3 were united as a 3. Hecate was very wise. I mean, she's not seen as the wise goddess because that's Athena's role, but she was still seen as a wise goddess. I mean, she had magic, she had witchcraft, she knew her potions and her plants and her spells. She was very, very wise and clever, and she would often help the gods with their battles with their giants, which would probably lead down to Zeus having some sort of issue or some sort of problem, and she would help with that. She would be wise to that. Whether her loyalties laid with certain parts, I don't know, but she did assist with that, so that would be something big that she would be involved in. So the Greeks had very different beliefs for different things. Like I've said before, they believed that everything had a reason and everything had a purpose, and that just wasn't the way that life was. There was always a meaning behind everything, and I love that. I think that that is something great to have, that there is an answer for everything. There is not the unknown, because they knew. So because of that, they believed in different things. So they believed that Hecate was someone who needed to be worshipped. She was a protector. She would help protect sailors and children and shepherds, and she was seen as somebody who would help with that transition from earth living down into Tartarus in the underworld. Along with Persephone, she was seen as somebody who would help you do that. And because of that, the Greeks would worship her in their homes, up to her and worshipped her in daily lives. They created shrines for her, asking to help to not bring evil spirits into their homes, because she was magical. She had that power to do so, to help them with that. Trusted her, they prayed to her, there was spiritual connections to her. So like I said, although she was seen as a negative thing, a dark, mysterious figure that lived in the underworld with Hades, who was this evil lord of the underworld who kidnapped Persephone, and there's this evilness about him. If you're going to look at good and evil, he was seen as evil, so therefore she was a monster, a witch, but she wasn't. She was more than that, and because they saw her as something dark, that doesn't mean that she can't help you. That doesn't mean that she wasn't something to aspire to be like and to want to help, and that she wouldn't help you if you worshipped her and looked up to her. Like, just because death is a negative thing doesn't mean that it has to be transitioned into a negative thing. It can be transitioned into a good thing, and there can be good within that. It doesn't have to be such a bad negative thing. But like I said before, there's not too much about her. It's more just things that you can assume happened. When you look at the Greeks and their way of lives and the way that they lived and what they worshipped and how they believed that everything had a reason and a purpose, you can understand that she was also seen as something big in their lives and the way that their culture was. And it's very exciting because I love magic and I love mythology and I love witchcraft, and Hecate being a part of all of those things makes me love her even more. I love the darkness of it and the underworld side of it as well, and I think that's so cool. But yeah, there's not much about her, which is disappointing. I wish there was more to sort of say about her, but unlike other gods like Persephone, there is less about her. It's funny how when you start doing videos like this and you start researching more into those characters in the mythology stories, you realise that there's actually not that much about them. And then when you start looking into the gods and the goddesses side of it, you still see there's not much of it. I mean, we hear about the same stories over and over again, like Hercules and Zeus and Poseidon, but you don't realise that there's actually not many stories about the ones that are the coolest. And I think that's what I love the most, the ones that have got that mystery about them and you don't know too much about them. Okay, so let's have a little look through here, see if there's anything else that we can find about her that we didn't already speak about. So it says that Hecate was the daughter of a second generation Titan goddess, Asteria and Persis. She was known to the poet Hesiod as a beneficial goddess whom Zeus honoured above all others, giving her a wide range of authority on earth and sea as well as the heavens. She was responsible for the wealth and good fortune, victory in battle and athletic competition, bountiful fishermen catches, fertility of flocks, the growth and health of young kids, kings' well-reasoned judgments, sound deliberations of the assembly. So she's quite a lot of stuff actually. As a consequence, she was involved with the fertility of every facet of family and political life. In spite of all of this, Hecate is generally remembered with her links of magic, necromancy and witching hour, her darker aspects having been emphasised by later classical authors. So as time went on, she became more darker than originally at the beginning. She was also the goddess of crossroads and transitions, like we spoke about with the death. Just because it was a bad thing doesn't mean that she couldn't help with the transition over there. In her various guises, Hecate was associated with Artemis, Demeter, Hermes, Selene and Persephone. So Artemis, which we'll get into another video, is the goddess of hunt. We've got Demeter, who is the goddess of harvest, Hermes, who is the goddess of messages, Selene, who is night, and Persephone, who is goddess of spring. So Persephone, whose abduction with Hades was said, whose abduction by Hades she was said to have witnessed. And in the Roman world, she was known as Trivia, who was the goddess of three ways, like I said, with the three heads. A reference of Hecate of the goddess of crossroads, she's represented in art holding torches with a dog and even having three bodies. In mythology, this goddess played a crucial role in the expedition of Jason, so Jason and the Golden Fleece and the Argonauts. She succeeded in the quest for the Golden Fleece only through the assistance he received from Medea, a priestess of the goddess. Medea had also received instructions for Hecate in witchcraft and the handling of magical herbs. And with these herbs, she could extinguish fire and change the course of rivers as well as the stars and the moon. So not just in Greek mythology, but a lot of sailors and pirates and stuff, they would see the stars and they would use that as a guideline. Like when we go back into the Bible with finding Jesus, they were looking at the star with three wise men. So they believed that stars were maps in the sky, that they could lead them to where they wanted to go. So if you can change that, you can change the course of the way that they are going. Medea supplied Jason with the ointment that made him invulnerable to sword and fire. It was derived from the root of a saffron-coloured plant that has sprung from blood and dropped from the eagle, eating it continuously, regenerating the heart from Prometheus, who was the Titan, which we'll talk about later, who basically had an eagle eat its appendix and livers and body parts because he was punished by Zeus. In order to successfully harvest this plant, Medea needed to cut the root at night and after cleansing herself ritually. So that is just a little bit more information about Hecate. So she did have more roles and stuff like that in stories, but just remember, like, she didn't have big stories. So the little stories, she plays a part in it, but she's not seen as the main character in that story, which is disappointing because there's so much that I wish we knew about her. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that gave you a little bit more information about who Hecate was. I I can't rave as much as I can about the Lore Olympus comic that you need to read, which is so good, and she's in that and she plays more of a part in that, and she's so cool, and yeah, she's just brilliant. I love her. I think she's great. She's one of my favourites. But yeah, so I will see you guys soon. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you some information. Let me know in the comment section below if there's anything you didn't know, if there's something that you knew that I didn't know. And are you a team Hecate like myself? I'll see you guys soon. Bye.